I welcome you all for today's e-conference on World Biofuel Day, promotion of biofuels for a better environment, organized by Indian Chemical News and supported by Industrial Boilers Limited. Myself, Praveen Prashant, editor Indian Chemical News, will be your host and moderator for today's e-conference. Just a brief on Indian Chemical News. It's a new age media platform which provides a complete 360-degree view on the chemical vertical, both local as well as global. ICN disseminates information through multiple platforms, news portal, research reports, e-conferences, industry reports, and others. Today, we have got an illustrious gathering of industry stalwarts from biofuel sector, both from India and Brazil. We have with us Mr. Adnan Ahmed, VC and MD Clariant India. He is also the region president for Clariant in India and has over 32 years of experience across sectors and continents. Before Clariant, he worked with BP, where he held various global and leadership roles. He has also received National Energy Conservation Award from Dr. Manmohan Singh in 2004 and also received Helios Award from Human Energy by Lord Brown, the erstwhile chief executive of BP PLC. We have Sameer Somaya, CMD Godavari Biorefineries Limited. Since last 28 years, he has taken the company forward to focus on economic, social, and environmental sustainability, supported by research and innovation. Please take the next slide. He combines his love for education and chemistry, and under Somaya Trust, manages over 30 educational institutions. He is also a committee member of Green Chemistry Initiative, constituted by the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister. We have Mr. Milind Patke, former Executive Director, Biofuels, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, recently retired as ED Biofuels after working for 37 years with Maharatna Public Sector Enterprise in various capacities across lubricants, brands, marketing, and biofuels. He is very passionate to create value through innovation and forward and focused execution. Under his leadership, BPCL has set about its first ever 2G ethanol plant at Bargarh in Unisa, and moreover, the plant will also be integrating with 1G ethanol facility. In biofuels, he leads large-scale integration across states and central government bodies. Mr. Shishir Joshipura, CEO, MD, and Praj Industries Limited, has over 35 years of rich experience in varied fields of engineering. Shishir is a mechanical engineer from BITS Pilani and advanced management graduate from Harvard Business School, passionate about smart manufacturing, and is the founding director for Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE, an industry think tank and policy advocacy organization for energy efficiency in India. Professor Goncalo Pereira is a full professor and coordinator, Genomics and Bioenergy Laboratory, UNICAM. He is also the coordinator for International PhD program in bioenergy. He was one of the founders of Grand Bio, the first 2G ethanol company in the Southern Hemisphere, and director of National Laboratory for Bioethanol. He has graduated, he helped in graduating 87, graduate level people and doctors, masters and doctors, and published 160 international articles and has applied for 36 patents and also published one book. We have Cyrus Engineer. He is the director for Industrial Boilers Limited and IB Turbo Private Limited. This company has installed, has 2,000 international customers and 10,000 plus Indian customers, and has been connected with the production of boilers right from 1974. He is also the member of the Center Boilers Board, the apex law market making body for boilers equivalent to ASME of USA, published many research papers in international journals, and is close and is also a guest lecturer at Aston University, Birmingham, and IIT Delhi. So with this introduction of our speakers, the next slide, the key discussion points. Next slide, please. The challenges in achieving 20% ethanol blending in fuel by 2025, investment required to meet this target, why biofuels will provide for a better environment, comparison of E100 with E20 in Brazil, development in automobile sector with respect to E100, R&D adaptation required in automobile to meet E100 requirement, how will ethanol blending affect farmers, single window, for setting up ethanol distilleries, role of research institution, development in flex fuel engine technology, and consumer awareness campaigns for promoting ethanol. Next slide. It's about the upcoming e-conference. On August 27, we have on agrochemicals, the next growth enabler for the Indian chemical industry. Then the next is, we are planning a virtual event, next slide, on Next Gen Chemical and Petrochemical Summit, which is on October 7 to 8, 2021. And the theme of the event is moving in the big league. The different sessions in the two-day conference is the policy changes to make Indian chemical industry globally attractive, specialty chemicals expanding its horizons, agrochemicals doubling India's exports, and farmers' income, petrochemicals driving sustainable growth, hydrogen and industry 4.0, accelerating its pace, sustainability earlier the better, hydrogen the next clean energy, and pharmaceutical strengthening collaboration between chemical and pharmaceutical. So with this, let me, before we start the panel discussion, let me request Mr. Cyrus Engineer, Director, Industrial Boilers Limited and IB Turbo Private Limited, to give a short presentation. So I would request to Mr. Cyrus Engineer if he can complete his presentation in 10 minutes. So over to Mr. Cyrus Engineer.
May I request screen sharing permission?
Would request if you can give the screen sharing to Mr. Cyrus Engineer.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today being a biofuel day, it's interesting because although we are talking about the liquid biofuel, I will try to cover the solid biofuel also, which is as important as any other fuel.
Have you got the screen sharing, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm covering certain parts of the ethanol unit manufacturing factories, which is the power plant, the heat and power, the steam and the power generation, where our company specializes in. And what are the things that one needs to consider when putting up such a project from the power plant perspective. So Industrial Boilers Limited is an old company, 74 years as a company by the name of Industrial Boilers, but our business goes down more than 100 years from the time of the British. We have 3 manufacturing factories for boilers at Vapi, and turbine manufacturing is done in 2 factories. One is done at Greater Noida and the other is at Baroda. The Baroda is the latest unit. We have certified by ASME with all the US and PP stamps, the national board in the USA, Euro certified, which is the CE stamp, as well as the Central Indian Boiler Regulations. Now these stamps are important because we are manufacturing boilers for a lot of companies who put their brand label on their boilers. So in Thailand, we have a joint venture company, IBG. Kenya, we have thermal engineering. In the US, we sell boilers to Moss Boilers, who puts their brand name and sells it in their local market. Belgium, it goes under the BIC brand. Malaysia, Wisdomex takes these boilers and puts their label on it. France, Comter, and Ukraine, Singa Energy. So these are the companies who buy our boilers manufactured well in India, proudly made in India, and sold in their markets. Besides that, 40% of our turnover goes into exports to these 30-odd countries. Several users, we have 2,000 international customers. These are the retail customers, I would call them, besides the ones who are using the boilers for their for labeling and selling in their respective countries. In India also, we are having more than 10,000 customers who buy our products, boilers and turbines. And since we are focused on exports, we keep receiving the best export award time and again from the government of India for our boilers and turbines. A short video on our This is our turbine shop at Vapi, at Greater Noida, where we are making these turbines up to 10 megawatt. There is another new plant at Vadodara where we are making reaction turbines. These are the latest turbines with very high efficiency. Our IBL has always been a R&D focused company, and the ones that are marked in red are the ones which are relevant to today's discussion, where how the technology has moved from 86 onwards. We were the first company in India to start fluidized bed manufacturing, long before a lot of companies were born in India. And we have made turbines from 2002 with a multi-stage turbines from 2005. The Magnum at 2009, this is a German boiler. We had license from them, which is now no longer there. And a good number of boilers have been manufactured in this range. Then we have pulsating grades or pulsing grades, which are for a wide variety of biomass. And now we have this reaction turbines, which are high efficiency turbines, which give about 5 to 10% more electricity for the same steam flow. The latest, of course, is the medical oxygen plant, which is in demand due to COVID. Now the focus on ethanol. So for those who are not familiar with or who are interested in putting up plants, the power plants are actually of two types. One is the one which supplies power to grid, which is a condensing turbine system. And the other is what we are talking of for ethanol and for rice mills, breweries. This is a combined heat and power, where the steam and power are generated simultaneously. The good part about ethanol industry is that 100% electricity can be generated from within our own steam requirement. There is no need to buy power from outside. So this is how the system looks like. You have a boiler and a turbine, and this is a sort of an extraction process where the excess energy due to superheat and high pressure is removed out and to convert into electricity. And the superheated steam from here is going to the process, the distillery. So Magnum, as I mentioned, is the first choice high pressure boiler, absolutely compact and very rugged, designed with German technology, has very, very low failure rate. 10-15 years, no need to change any boiler tubes or anything. It's completely a very excellent boiler for all purposes. And we have modified it from the German design for all biomass applications. This is our multi-stage turbine range with 11 kV alternators for power generation. And here we have two ranges. We have the impulse turbine range, which is up to 6 megawatt, and up to 10 megawatt we cover with the reaction turbine. So based on our discussions with several manufacturers of these of ethanol factories, manufacturing plants, we have consolidated the information. It is varying from supplier to supplier. But we have seen that you have different capacity of ethanol plant and what sort of turbine and what sort of power generation you can expect. This has been consolidated here. 50 KLPD is the smallest plant, which is at a lower pressure. So there has to be some changes in the power plant to make it a 100% self-generated plant, which we have done recently in near Delhi. So as a boiler turbine package manufacturer, we provide the complete heat and mass diagram. So this is one which is for 200 KLPD, where we talk of how much is the fuel that is going to go in, how much will be your consumption of fuel, what is the steam temperature and pressure which enters the turbine, how much electricity we will generate, how much desuperating will be required for the process steam. This is your distillery, and condensate which goes back into deaerator, how much would be the makeup water. So this whole process is done by us in-house and given to a customer. These are usually done by either consultants or some other type of people in the field. The other issue which is very critical in power plants is the steam piping, where a lot of turbines we have seen go into failure. On the left, you see a steam pipeline which is in cold condition. On the top is where the boiler steam comes out from, and on the bottom is where the turbine inlet is. When this boiler goes under high pressure, high temperature, it starts to expand in what you see on the right hand side. This is the movement of the piping. A good design makes sure that the starting and the ending point still remains the same, irrespective of what happens due to temperature or pressure. So this is a calculations that we have done, and we give it all our packages. Now, the government of India has come out with a roadmap for ethanol blending, and they have also come out with certain predetermined values. Like, let's take for example rice available with FCI, where the cost is 20,000 rupees per metric ton of feedstock, and assume to give 450 kiloliter of ethanol per metric ton, 400 liter per metric ton, and they are going to give you a price of 56.87. Now this price is determined. I don't think there is any scope to increase or decrease as of now. So industry is stuck with an input cost and an output cost. In between, only your process efficiency seems to be the way out, in which ethanol factory could be either successful or can go in the dumps. But there is a way that as a boiler manufacturer, if you select the correct fuel, there is a way in which you can reduce your cost and make your plant profitable. So like for example, if you go into an area like Delhi NCR, where natural gas is compulsory, no biomass, no coal, nothing is allowed, you could land up with 13 rupees 68 paise as the cost of the boiler fuel itself. Now that will mean that your unit is sick from day one, because that is not the type of profit that you have in this sort of industry. So you will have to look at cheaper fuels. If we are talking of coal and we talk of say a city like Vapi or Surat, which is predetermined by coal, then again you are in a trouble. So the location of the plant will have to be specific to where biomass is available and not where feedstock only is available. Both are important. As we go down this ladder and we see Parali, which is a major headache for the Supreme Court also, there you land up with 2 rupees 10 paise as your input cost for ethanol. Or mustard straw, which is 2 rupees 42 paise. Now why mustard straw is cheap? It got potash in it, and it causes similar problems that you get with your slope or Venus fired boilers. So that is why most boiler manufacturers don't recommend mustard straw. But we have developed boilers which work very well on mustard straw. Then other new incoming fuel, I was in Uttarakhand the other day, and I saw that leaves and bark is one of the big cottage purchase. Small families are earning money out of this. They do collection, and they are able to live their own life by collecting and supplying to these industries. And every day they collect 5 to 10 ton, and they make about 5 to 7,000 rupees collecting this leaves and bark. And then you have municipal solid waste, which is also one big headache. But here again, you will have to go near to a dump, or whether you can tie up with a municipal corporation who can deliver the municipal waste to the distillery. So these are the photographs of what we are talking about. Prali is the roots and the stems of the rice plant. Tudi or mustard is what you get as a waste from the mustard plant. Corn cobs will come because if somebody is doing corn as a feedstock, then this is available. Bark, patta kutti is leaves, and municipal solid waste. These are the ones which will develop good profit for the distillery. Otherwise, it will become a very tight situation. So we have these grates which are hydraulically operated, and with different air settings, these work beautifully for all these fuels that I've just mentioned. This is an installation working with all this type of fuel, and the fuel is not constant. Every season it changes, every time it changes, what availability comes. It is a job to maintain, to buy biofuels. This is a boiler under erection, a Magnum boiler. We have 400 of these in operation, and came for the German design, and handles a lot of these, all of these biofuels that I just mentioned. So why IBL? This is a question which we answer with great pleasure. We are a one source, as I mentioned, from fuel to boiler to pipeline, turbine, complete integration of the process. Single point service setup, because our teams are all trained, the boiler and turbine teams are all common. We do the high pressure steam design, electrification, and grid also synchronizing is assisted by us. And power consultants are not required. Of course, there are some mills which have in-house strength, but there will be a lot of new incoming companies who will require hand holding. This is where we come in as a strong partner in the plant. So I hope, Pravinji, I have covered this in 10 minutes, as you mentioned. This is a photograph of a recent installation just commissioned. This is a distillery near to Delhi, and 50 KLPD. Thank you so much.
You're on mute, Pravinji. You're on mute.
So thank you, Mr. Cyrus Engineer, for your presentation. Now I would request Mr. Milind S. Patke. So his presentation is a short presentation on the challenges and opportunities of ethanol ecosystem. So over to Mr. Milind S. Patke.
Yeah. Thank you, Praveen. At the outset, let me thank Indian Chemical News for providing this opportunity to share my views. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is the entire ethanol ecosystem in India as it is today. And then we will look at the challenges and the opportunities that are there for each of the stakeholders. If you just look at, does not need much of an explanation, but just to set things right in the right perspective, left side is the upstream part of the industry where you have the sugar mills and the molasses-based distillery or the grain-based distillery, supported by their R&Ds, the ISMAs, IDAs of the world, and of course the technology provider, which is there in the light blue. The middle portion is the midstream, where the ethanol producing unit, which also produces ENA, DDGS, CBG, or CO2 and CO2. Then there is State Pollution Control Department, and there are various central government and state government agencies which directly, indirectly support the ethanol production. And then this ethanol is given to the OMCs, the oil marketing companies then blend it, and through their retail network, they are distributing it through the 50, 60,000 odd retail outlets across the country. Most of the OMCs are under the public sector, therefore they are guided by the Ministry of Petroleum. And of course, there is a role for Ministry of Road Transport because ultimately we are talking about vehicles, and more about it when we talk about the auto industry. So I've clubbed all the central and state government departments together, basically because let's look at the challenges. The pricing of ethanol on the basis of feedstock. There was a time when there was only one price based on C molasses. And 2 years back, the B molasses and sugarcane juice was introduced. And subsequently, the damaged food grain and maize also has been introduced. Now there are almost 5 different categories, for the feedstock. And year on year basis, these prices are looked at and their prices are revised during the month of August, after which the tenders are floated by the oil marketing companies. for tying up the volumes. So why this is a challenge? Because obviously the prices are all different. While the price of the finished stock is one, the price of finished stock varies based on the choice of feedstock. So sugarcane juice is almost 62 rupees. We just saw in the earlier slide. And the lowest is C molasses, which is 48. The quality of the product produced is same. I beg your pardon, not the price. The quality of the product, 99.9% ethanol, anhydrous ethanol being the same, the prices of products are different based on the feedstock, and that's a challenge. Ensuring uniform blending percentage across the country. This is one big challenge. We all know that today, primarily UP, Maharashtra, and Karnataka are producing most of the ethanol in the country, whereas the petrol consumption is across all the states and union territories. And it is quite a challenge to ensure that if a particular percentage E10 or E20 is there, then across the country, length and breadth of the country, this fuel has to be available. And therefore, this is a big challenge. Creation of addition distillation capacity. We are all aware that today we require almost 400 crore liters against an estimated 4,000 crore liters of petrol sale. We are getting about 340, 350, which means we will end up with about 8.5% to 9%, depending on what is the petrol growth during the next 3-4 months. But next year, and if we all come out of the pandemic successfully, then petrol growth is going to rebound. It's going to be very high, and therefore the ethanol requirement will be touching, my estimate is somewhere near 500 crore liters. Going forward, of course, 10% will require 500 crore liters. And subsequently in 23 or 25, wherever we launch E20, the requirement will go upwards of 1,000 crore liters. Are we going to have an additional distillation capacity to meet that requirement? I mean, going from 350 crore liters of actual capacities which are being made available to almost 1,000 crore liters in a span of next 4 years, I think that's going to be a huge challenge. Speedy approvals by the Pollution Control Board. We saw in 2019 when molasses based ethanol was introduced, sugarcane juice was introduced, there was some time taken by the Pollution Control Board in giving the approvals. And therefore, while a lot of changes have taken place and a lot of process has been eased out, but still this remains a challenge. Implementation of an IDR Act, Industries Development Regulation Act, by which the central government gets the control of the excisable product. Otherwise, it was a state subject. Most of the states are allowing this ethanol to be moved without any export duty, import duty, but there are some states where there is still a problem, and therefore this is a challenge. Let's look at the opportunities. Surplus sugar after the export subsidies were drawn in December 23. Almost 6 lakh tons of sugar will be surplus, which can be converted into 360 crore liters of additional ethanol, provided we have the additional distillation capacity. But that's a huge opportunity. Surplus rice. Now we have more than 3 years of surplus rice available, and that is why government came up with a particular policy change in the month of December 2020 that surplus rice from FCI godowns will be available at the rate of 20 rupees 50 paise with a price of about 56.87 for the ethanol. Maize farming. Now this is one huge opportunity area. Today, in India, the maize yield is about 2.6 tons per hectare. I'm told that in USA it's about 10.7, which means there's a huge possibility of increasing the maize yield in the Indian farming industry. And if that really happens in the days forward, then a lot of this maize will be there in so-called deficit states in the country, states like Telangana, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. A lot of states will have maize, and therefore more availability for ethanol manufacturing. More ethanol capacity this enables government to advance the E20 implementation. So that's an opportunity. If more such capacity comes up, then it from 2030 to 2025, we've already seen a 5-year of the capacity, the policy implementation being advanced. So that's huge opportunity. Okay. Let's look at the oil marketing companies very quickly. What are the challenges? I told about uniform distribution. That's a big challenge. Increased complexities in storage and handling of multiple variants. Selling E100, E10, E20 from same petrol pump, huge challenge. Handling multiple variants of gasoline. Then ethanol compatible dispensing units. You know, when you have E20 and E100, then obviously the lot of dispensing unit parts require change. They have to work out the optimum transportation cost, because if West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, J&K and Northeast don't have ethanol, then obviously you can't be supplying at a very high transportation cost. The price of petrol will go up. And lastly, mismatch of petrol seasonality versus ethanol seasonality. You know, while ethanol is available during a particular season from different feedstock, like during season, it will be more of sugarcane juice and B molasses, then later on it will be C molasses. And the quantities also would be varying. If there is a severe monsoon, floods, etc., then obviously the requirement would go down, whereas petrol remains by and large constant throughout the 12 months, increasing in the last 3-4 months of the year. Opportunities, yes, reduction of carbon footprint, huge opportunity. OMCs can set up their own ethanol manufacturing plants to improve reliability. That's a huge opportunity. Reducing dependence on imported crude, use of ethanol as an octane booster. That's a 108 is an octane number, and you put more of ethanol, then obviously you can go with a higher octane number. Use of ethanol for diesel blending. Some trials I'm told are on. Almost ARA has tried with 7.7% in diesel. And if that succeeds, then the ethanol requirement would further go up. Let's quickly look at the automakers. You know, automakers, the models from 2008 onwards have a material compatibility with ethanol, but not engine compatibility. Now, with E20 being rolled out in 23, should a automaker go for an E20 compatible or E10 compatible or both or somewhere midway? That's a challenge, because ethanol has a lower calorific value. The octane number, higher octane number of ethanol can be taken advantage of, and an engine can be designed with a higher combustion ratio, with a higher thermal efficiency, higher torque, and therefore it's a challenge for an automaker to decide where to pitch it. Decision on flex fuel vehicles. In Brazil, we will be hearing from Brazil also very shortly, but in Brazil, US, there are flex fuel vehicles, and we can learn from them as to when, if ethanol is available in different blend percentages, can the vehicle take it. Decision on value proposition to customers. This will be a challenge to the automakers. We all know that automakers pitch on either a fuel mileage, or on drivability, or on the smooth running, or on the higher power. So they will have to definitely decide on the value proposition to the customers. Development of E100 is already ready, whereas we do not have the two-wheelers compatible with E100. So that's a big challenge. Yes, automakers can launch new variants, they can launch new flex fuel vehicles, they can adopt to different value proposition and recalibrate their strategy vis-a-vis electric vehicles, because a customer also would like to look at EV versus a E20 vehicle. Existing producer, I will just scan through because my 10 minutes are up now. That challenges: choice of feedstock, ethanol or ENA, how much quantity, choice of technology, tie-ups with OMCs, capacity addition in a surplus state. You know, surplus state definitely has more of ethanol available. And if you're going for an expansion, the existing producer, well, the oil companies may not be able to tie up, or the product will have to be moved over large distances across the country. The opportunities are finalized expansion plan, single feed, dual feed, or enhanced capacity. New capacity can be added in deficit state with grain as feedstock. Can enter into tripartite arrangement with OMC's bank and utilize the interest subvention scheme by the government of India. So these are some of the opportunities. Similarly, for new producer, he has to decide on which deficit state he needs to put up the plant. What is the choice of feedstock? What is the right capacity? Availability of land, water. He has to enter into a sales purchase agreement with OMC. Those are the challenges. Opportunities, yes, tripartite arrangement with OMCs and banks will ensure that his product gets sold over a period of next 15 years. There is an interest subvention scheme. EC norms have been eased up to 200 KL. You don't have to go to central, and therefore state pollution control boards can give the clearance. Deficit states, you can have the grain-based ethanol plants. Technology providers, technology solutions will have to be offered, which give a lower capex and opex for a project proponent. We need to optimize the water consumption, especially in 2G technology. Even in 1G, with a 500 KL per day plant, you require almost 3,000 plus KL per day of water, makeup water. And that's a huge water requirement. And therefore, all states or all locations may not be ideal to put up these plants. The technology provider needs to work out an integrated, optimized solution for 2G, 1G, and CBG. Ultimately, somewhere there are commonalities, and if economies of scale can be achieved and all these three products can be integrated, the idea being, since OMC is the party which is off-taking all the products, it makes sense to integrate all these three, reduce your OPEX, and make all these products. Provide revenue streams for biochemicals. We require now some biochemicals and some patents so that along with ethanol, some more biochemicals like polylactic acid or furfural, etc. can be made, which will reduce the cost of ethanol. Platform for testing, optimizing technology. So they are getting this huge opportunity for testing their technology. And it's a technology for the biochemicals also, the opportunity is there. Technology interventions to promote and optimize maize-based ethanol manufacturing. Yes, maize has a lower yield compared to rice, but still, if the overall yield of maize is going up, and in certain deficit states, more and more parties are willing to put up maize-based plants, then probably the technology can be suitably developed only for maize manufacturing. Farmers, of course, we all know, with surplus rice and surplus sugar, of course, they will have to look at the alternate options like maize farming. Ethanol production requires high makeup water. So this is the other side of it, which I have personally faced in Orissa, and that is why I put it here, is that if you require so much of water, and the farmers might feel discomfort releasing so much of water for an industry when the canal has been put up for irrigation. So I think that is one issue we need to look at going forward. Maize farming is an option which and government is encouraging now. Maize demands much less water. That's one very big opportunity. And high ethanol demand will ensure better and faster remuneration for its produce. Finally, the retail customer. I have just one slide last. The uniform availability of E10 or E20, E100 across the country, that's going to be a big challenge, especially with all states not producing ethanol. What is a better option, EV or E20 compliant vehicle? I think this is something a customer will ask himself or herself in the 2023-24 when the E20 compliant vehicle is released. Higher maintenance due to E20, we do not know yet. In India, in Indian kind of climate, when E20 is regularly used everywhere, we do not know what kind of cost would be there. What will be the mileage with an E20 unless a new engine design comes up, and we then only will come to know. Definitely some tests have shown that it definitely gives a huge advantage as far as power is concerned vis-a-vis E0, but we do not know on the mileage front. Will flex fuel vehicle be costlier? We do not know. We need to wait and see that. Opportunities, yes, low carbon emissions, improved power with E20 compliant vehicles. So that's my perspective on the entire ecosystem. I had to slightly hurry it, but I'm sure I have been able to cover important points. Thank you so much for patient listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Milindas Patkeji, for completely talking about all the challenges and opportunities in this entire ecosystem. Before I open the panel discussion, let me talk about two things which we have carried even today in our ICN website and also in the newsletter. Two important developments. The government approved rupees 600 crore financial support to 2G ethanol projects for HPCL in Bathinda, IOCL in Panipat, BPCL in Badgar, and NRL Numaligarh in Assam. So this is the one thing. The second thing is we were talking about a target of 343.16 crores, and I think Mr. Milind Ji was also talking about 400 crores and then 1,000 crores. We have achieved around 209.67 crore liters to AMC. This is the data which is till 2nd of August 2021. With these reference and whatever Milinji talked about, let me now open the panel discussion, and I would request all panelists will get 3 tracks of 3 minutes each. We have already overshooted, but we'll try. If all of you cooperate, it would be easier for me. Otherwise, our delegates will have an extended round. Sorry for this. But I would request delegates to also type in their questions during the course of the e-conference so that we can take it up at the end of the session. Now, let me ask Mr. Samir S. Somayaji if he can talk about in his 3 minutes, how will biofuel program help India in the long run, being a sugarcane manufacturer, being an ethanol manufacturer, and now in this new avatar of biofuel, how do you see India in the long run? So over to Mr. Samir Somayaji.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to compliment Mr. Milind Patke for a comprehensive summary of the opportunities and challenges in all sectors. So in many ways, he has covered how this program will help India, very well. But so if I may maybe briefly summarize what he has said. See, the Indian farming sector is often subject to vagaries of nature and market prices. And with vagaries of nature, the market prices changes are very volatile. And that volatility of economics further accentuates these vagaries. So I think the creation of a new market, which is food and fuel, as mentioned, will certainly help a more consistent and stable cash flow to our farmers. And in India, the large population is small farmers, and it is very important for our policies and our markets to provide a stable livelihood and income stream for them. So I think this is the first thing I would like to say. The second thing I would like to say is that these vagaries of prices and changes affect the processors. And this ethanol program has provided an optionality for processors of sugar cane to sugar, much like in Brazil, such that they can now, based on the market conditions and a wonderful sink market of ethanol, have optionality based on the capacity of ethanol that they have. In our own company, for example, last year, we diverted more than 35% of our sugar in cane to ethanol, which is similar to the Brazilian model. It further adds optionality in terms of providing the ethanol facility with alternative feedstock, such as maize, that was also mentioned earlier. So I think this is the second benefit, optionality to the processors in terms of whether you take sugar cane into ethanol or sugar, or whether you bring other feedstock to make ethanol also. That is the second aspect. The third aspect, I think, which is very important, is energy security for the country. You know, we have a surplus of sunlight and soil in the country. And we talk about solar energy as solar panels and things like that. Let us not forget that the solar energy is also converted by photosynthesis into the tremendous agriculture feedstock that we have. And the making of biofuels, which is coming from a renewable feedstock compared to fossil feedstocks, is another big answer to supplement the energy security of the country. And I think it is very important to note this. And we have to, and this energy security is ultimately money that is going to a large number of, I will say, farmers ultimately through processors. That is number 3. The fourth point, which I would like to stress, is climate change. We have been talking about climate change, and the world is seeing the effect of climate change everywhere right now. And ethanol blended fuel has 2 major issues. Firstly, it is definitely a much lower carbon footprint. And of course, it also depends on how you grow the cane. So I'm not getting into that because that goes into much more detail. But it is definitely the carbon generated when you burn is also consumed by the cane as it grows. So much larger footprint, smaller footprint. And the second thing is when the fuel burns, you also get much cleaner emissions. So you have better climate change and a better environment, and fundamentally a more sustainable world. So this is how I think it will benefit our nation and in a larger sense, the world. So that's my 3-minute piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Sameerji, for your point-wise, what we can say about all the points that you discussed. Now, before I come to the before I come to the solution provider, let me talk to Professor Goncalo Pereira, who has joined from Brazil. Early morning for him. Sir, you have listened to everybody, all our Indian speakers. So, wanted to know from you, how is the 2G ethanol situation in Brazil? So, your 3 minutes of, sir, speech. Over to Mr. Professor Goncalo Pereira.
Initially, thank you very much for the indication of my name and the opportunity to discuss with you. A very nice overview made by Dr. Milling. Situation in Brazil, I would say, I'd like very much when I see the situation in India. Initially, I see that India and Brazil has a lot of opportunities if we work together. In Brazil, we began the utilization of ethanol, not because of climate change or things like that, but in 70s because of oil price. I think here everybody remember what happens in 70s, and the country has paralyzed. But instead of this, we have developed the ethanol production that was very, very, very little at that time. But in order to do that, we needed to have the motorization. Initially, we got the ethanol vehicles. It was not very high technology at that moment. However, the evolution that we had in our mobile industry, in our auto industry, was amazing. And mainly, since only Brazil was utilizing ethanol at that time, we could not import solutions. We must develop solutions by ourselves. And this is, in my opinion, the great thing with the ethanol value chain. I really don't like to speak only about ethanol production. We need to understand the ethanol value chain, beginning in the field, what Samir said about emissions in sugarcane. Actually, we can have negative emissions if you put the correct technology in the field. For example, instead of putting nitrogen, a lot of microorganisms that can live inside the sugarcane roots can take this nitrogen from the soil, from the air. That means this is an opportunity for our scientists. And one thing that we see in India is a lot of brains. It's amazing the amount of intelligence that you have in your countries, and all these problems that we have in the value chain of the ethanol are actually opportunities for new startups, for people with that. And we are going to have the opportunity to speak a little bit about this, but in my opinion, what we need now is the development of the fuel cells in order to utilize the ethanol as a battery for the electrification that for sure will come, is coming, and it is great. However, not the lithium battery. Ethanol as a battery is, in my opinion, the solution. My 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Mr. Sisi Joshipura, if he can talk about what would be the path for biofuel in India, and how do you compare biofuel with hydrogen? So over to Mr. Sisi Joshipura.
Thank you, Praveen, and thank you, all my co-panelists. It's been great hearing to all of you before me, and in a manner of speaking, I have a tough task because all of you have been so eminently and eloquently laid out the whole platform in any case. So, but let's go to biofuels, and I think if you look at a larger scope of biofuels, which is ethanol from different feedstocks, CBG, as we call it, or the RNG, as the word calls it, the renewable gas, again from different feedstocks. The diesel program, biodiesel program from used cooking oil. These are something that I call as under our biomobility platform solutions that are applicable to surface transport. There are two more other modes of transport that will very quickly emerge as destinations for biofuels. One is the air transport. Very clearly, the only available option for the airline industries to reduce the CO2 emission, for which everybody is now very clearly focused, and we just saw the climate report that came out yesterday. Very clearly, the demand will grow, the regulations will grow, the pressure will grow, and the need will grow to ensure that we switch to more sustainable fuels, which means even the airline industries will have to shift to sustainable aviation fuel. We can go to the other mode of transport, which is the marine transport. Even there, today we all end up, the most heavily polluting fuels end up with the marine transportation side. We need to switch that as well to the marine biofuel. So the landscape of the mobility, or biomobility as we call it, will continuously evolve, not limiting itself to only surface transport, but it will also go and include air and marine forms of transportation as well. So that's one dimension. We will see emergence of very different feedstocks. Already we have seen sugary feedstock, a very liberalized program from, especially in India. Brazil is already following it. We will also see a lot of starchy feedstocks that we walk in now. One is the grain part of it. I already saw questions being asked about different kind of feedstocks that we put to use. And third, but in my opinion, probably the most important of all, is the cellulosic feedstock, or the agriculture waste base, which is, as Samir so eloquently put it, nothing but solar energy converted into a very different form. So we will see emergence of different feedstocks. The technology will continuously evolve to make more and more feedstocks feasible. We mentioned about, Praveen, you mentioned about the 4 projects in India which have been granted the viability gap funding by the government. 3 of them we are building. One of them was with Mr. Patke in his previous capacity. We are very proud that we are going to build 3 plants in the world for external customers. In the 2G technology, lots and lots of developments have taken place, but very few projects are happening where you are building plant for somebody else. And we are very proud of the fact that India has taken lead, and we are building 3 plants for the oil marketing companies, which will be based on rice straw as the basic feedstock. So feedstock evolution, market model evolution, and then the next level is equal. So these are all the bridge part of the fuels. But I think the next gen that we need to talk about, and that's what probably you also alluded to, is the fact that when do we transport to hydrogen economy, what happens? And I think even there, there's a huge role to be played by what progress we will develop right now under biofuels. Professor Pereira mentioned about ethanol being a base feedstock for hydrogen. So ethanol to hydrogen, ethanol to aviation fuel. We will see ethanol will also play a lot of big role as a basic building block for biochemicals, the bioplastics, biodegradable. We will see a whole host of application that will open up. So we will be able to see ethanol behave like a brick in a building. You have a brick, then you can create any building. And similarly, ethanol is one of the basic building bricks of the chemical world. And from there, we can probably build a whole host of solutions. So we are looking forward to a era where I personally believe there'll be increasingly higher and important role that biofuels will have to play, not only on the surface transport ethanol as it was what is visible to us right now, but both in liquid and gaseous form across all modes of transport and across very, very different kind of feedstocks. That's where I will stop. Thank you so much. I hope I will live my 3 minutes.
So good to know that, sir, out of 4, 3 you are building. And I hope you will get more such orders in times to come when these technologies are being developed and being operated by OMC. Now I would request Adnan Ahmed ji. He has made a request that he needs to make a short presentation of 4 minutes. He will take that extra 1 minute from us. And he will talk about how can India benefit from 2G bioethanol technology.
So I don't need slides.
Adnan Ahmed.
Yeah, thank you, Praveen. I don't need slides. Huh? I'll just talk if you're
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So firstly, thank you for inviting me to speak on this very important contemporary issue today, really, and especially as it's World Biofuels Day. And, speaking in front of the speakers that we've just heard, it's a real honor for me. And I've learned a lot just listening to what has transpired right now. As we see, right now, global energy markets are seeing a transformational change. This is probably something like never before, not even the 70s. And decarbonization has become the buzzword for everyone. I think it's just the speed with which it's moving, including big oil majors, they're talking about it. And they're all putting a huge amount of resources behind efforts to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, halt negative impacts of climate change, and so on. Just today, Samir was also talking about this. There were two headline news in BBC and CNN, and they're talking about forest fires in Greece, in Europe, and also in California, in the US. So the challenge to our future generations is absolutely real. And what we're talking about today is one of many solutions to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. It's extremely encouraging to see governments all over the world are looking at this as a priority. And India is not left behind either. I mean, the government, as you know, you just talked about it, is committed to implementing E20 by 2025, which requires bioethanol production capacity. Mr. Patke talked about it, but it has to increase five times from what it is today, 209 going up to 1,000 crore. So it's a huge amount of transformation that we have to go through in our country as well. And I'm going to share with you a Clarion state-of-the-art technology branded Sun Liquid that brings a paradigm change when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions generated from cars. So Joshipura talked about it as well. So Sun Liquid produces 2G ethanol with agricultural waste as the feedstock. And it's different from 1G, which is based on food grade. So to start with, it's a prime example of the circular economy. All components are either they minimize resources, or they ensure their optimal use, or they generate new resources that can be sustainably used. So there are no fossil resources that are required in the entire process. Agricultural waste is used as feedstock. Lignin, which is a byproduct, is easily utilized as fuel to produce electricity and steam, self-sufficient. And then vinasse, which is another byproduct, can be used as fertilizer in the fields, as it's done in our plants in Germany. So since pre-treatment of the agricultural waste uses no chemicals in our process, the byproducts also don't need processing to remove the chemicals. So less water washing and so on. Water consumption also comes down. So let's look at the stakeholders that we're dealing with. We have the farmer. Again, a lot of you talked about that before. Instead of burning stubble, they get value for selling it. You look at the community, pollution comes down from burning stubble. You look at the government, they reduce imports of crude, more self-sufficient, substituting with locally produced bioethanol. And then you have the manufacturer, the entrepreneur, the person who actually converts this agri waste to bioethanol. So these are the four key stakeholders. And the technology helps to reduce CO2 emissions substantially. So let's look at the transport sector, and I'll explain to you. If I have a plant which is 50,000 tons per annum of ethanol, or 100 KL per day, the average emission, if you look at Sun Liquid ethanol, is 4.7 grams of CO2 per mg. So if you look at fossil fuel comparators, it's 94 grams of CO2 emission per mg. So it's, almost 5 grams versus 95 grams. So we get over a 95% CO2 savings from Sun Liquid biofuel compared to gasoline. And for a 50,000 ton per annum plant of ethanol, this would result in savings of 120,000 tons of CO2 per annum, which is the equivalent of about 35,000 cars emitting whatever they emit when they're being used. So also, when you see compared to 1G ethanol gives you about a 50 to 60% savings versus gasoline in terms of CO2 emissions. 2G takes that up to 95%. So there are lots of benefits in terms of the environment and so on 2G ethanol. So, if it's so great, then why is the world not rushing to build 2G plants? And, at Clariant itself, we've been running a pre-commercial plant for a decade now in Germany. It's been producing high quality bioethanol for use in Europe. Clariant has also built a 50,000 ton per annum Sun Liquid plant in Romania, which is being commissioned right now as we speak. And we've sold another 2 licenses in Europe and 3 licenses in China. But why isn't there much more? Why aren't there many of them operating today? I think the big issue there is capex cost. And we heard about some of the viability gap funding and so on. So capex cost to build these plants is not small. And there are options being looked at to deal with that. They could be bolt-on plants to existing 1G, which could cut down the capex cost and so on to mitigate this. But the government support at this stage of evolution of this is really helping, certainly in China, in the EU, and we hope to see more of that in India too. So our government is aggressively pushing for bioethanol through 1G technology, which actually uses food grains, and 2G uses agricultural waste, as I told you, and it doesn't compete with the food chain. So watch this space as we see energy transformation to the new reality of climate change and a much more eco-friendly universe. Thank you.
So Adnanji, what is the likely scenario of this deployment in India, and how do you look at the cost-wise comparison with respect to other technologies?
So it is the cost-wise, it's absolutely high. I mean, I think Mr. Joshipura is a real expert on this, and he's already got 3 plants that he's working on. So there is an eagerness to bring this into India as well, and hopefully I think we all can't wait to see something like this coming up in India. It will come. It will come, and we will have to bring the capex cost down. It will happen over a period of a few years, and looking at bolt-on solutions. And I know some of you on the panel have been looking at that as well. So it'll come. It's a matter of time, Praveen. It's a matter of time.
And what's the viability gap funding which would be required to be put up from the government or the central government or the state government? What is it looking at? What would be that number? 20%, 30% of the overall cost, or what would be that, sir?
I think the more it is, the better. I don't know, Mr. Joshipura, you want to say?
But just to add to what Mr. Ahmed so eloquently put together, it's very important to understand that we are only looking at the first cost of ownership today. Okay, we are very concerned about what it cost me today. We're not factoring in the fact that we are compromising the right of a future generation to even live peacefully.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So see this, this forest fires or floods or droughts or
Yes.
we cannot even begin to imagine the impact. I mean, just imagine if I were to tell you, those of you who are living in Mumbai, if we were to tell you that 25 years from now the shoreline will move 3 kilometers inside, and that means practically the entire South Bombay gets wiped out. So we are not thinking in terms of the total cost of ownership. The problem today is this, that it is different stakeholders who pay different costs and not the same person. And that is why we are having this difficulty, because the stakeholder puts the capital today, said, look, I'm worried about my capital risk and I'm not worried about other risk. The environmental part is the future generation. Guys are not even born today. Why are we worried about it? But then the whole purpose of humanity is to look for the betterment of the next generation. So I think this is a much bigger argument that we need to address.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be what I would call as efforts underway. We have worked very closely on these 3 projects. We have learned so much doing this. During the execution of these projects, now we have moved from a situation of a negative IRR to a positive IRR projects. We have looked at the co-products development, which has become a very, very big enabler for making 2G plants. As Adnan was also saying, that we will need to see how the whole ecosystem develops. We need not be a single product focus. Maybe there's a central product, and then there are byproducts and co-products that come along that will make the plant even much more viable. I think even Mr. Patke mentioned that how do you get multiple products, the bolt-on solutions. So I think we are entering a very exciting era, right? Bolt-on, extra products, co-products, multiple feedstock, different fuels. Biofuel is just opening up. We are just beginning to see the initial part of it.
Yes.
I'm sure the future is much, much brighter and bigger.
Yes, and just one thing to cap up, to finish off on what you've just said, is today we have a choice of saying, am I going to do it now? Am I going to do it later and all? But in time to come, we won't have a choice. So unless we act today, it's going to be pushed on us and we won't be ready. So absolutely the right thing to do is for us to go ahead today. I've seen the plant that we have running in Germany today. It's running beautifully, it's producing the bioethanol. It's being used by some branded vehicles, automotive. So the Mercedes, for example, is trialing it out and it's working really well. We will not have an option going forward. I think Mr. Patke was saying option of, does the consumer want E20 or does he want, it's not about what, he's not going to be able to have a choice. I don't think there will be a choice.
Thank you, Shishir Joshipura and Mr. Adnan Ahmed for your views. Now I come to Mr. Cyrus Engineer. Sir, you talked about a lot of savings if we go for Parali or mustard straw, and you explained through a chart that you had. So, wanted to know how these meet the pollution norms on the one hand, and how do you see your boiler and turbine ideal for the biofuel and the ethanol industry? So would request, sir, if you can limit your time. We have already reached 4-5, and we have another 2 rounds to go, plus the Q&A.
Well, your first question was about the fuel.
Yes, with respect to parley and mustard straw.
Yes, barley, or what we call as rice straw and mustard. These are the fuels which are, they are not really fuels, they were waste materials. And now we have converted them into fuels. And also I just heard about feedstock. These are the items that are sold that were hardly being sold, or there was no buyer for them in the past. And that is why they have been very cheap. The moment you compare these with rice husk, which is a commercial fuel, you get into a lot of savings, something as high as 2 rupees for a liter of ethanol that you are going to produce, which for a 100 KLPD plant would be about 6 crores per year. That's the type of saving you are likely to get if you shift from rice husk to parley or mustard straw. The other part you mentioned was the pollution norms. See, anything that you do in the country has to meet pollution norms. And it's not just the CPCB or the state government, it's the villagers, the people around you who are also now very alert about how you burn your fuel in your boilers. So this goes without saying. We have the latest technologies. We have ESPs, we have wet scrubbers, we have dry scrubbers. Because if we are talking of municipal solid waste, we have a lot of equipment which can take care of all the pollution norms that are required and will be required in the future also. That's what I like to say.
And the other was how are they ideal for boiler and turbine is ideal for your biofuel and ethanol industry?
Yeah, so being a packaged manufacturer of boilers and turbines, we are in a position to develop the plant and to design the entire ecosystem of the power plant to suit the customer. That is our specialization, because everything is the whole technology of mixing and matching the boiler and turbine is in our hands. And there are a lot of manufacturers in our country who are good people, who good manufacturers, reputed boiler manufacturers, but they stick to their boiler manufacturing and they would probably bring a turbine from outside. Similarly, a turbine manufacturer would link up with a boiler manufacturer, but hardly you would find, except BHEL, who has this in-house boiler turbine package. So when it comes to combined heat and power, we are having this definite lead over the others.
Thank you, Mr. Cyrus Engineer. Now I come to Mr. Sameer Somayaji. Sir, you are, what I have seen is regularly you have been increasing your capacity and your expansion plans, which you have been notifying to the press community. So what would be the role of Godavari Biorefinery and your expectations from OMC? Keeping in view, Milind Saab talked about 1,000 odd crores liters that we would be requiring if we move away from E20 onwards. So your views, sir.
Moving to E20, I think, is when we would need 10 billion liters.
Yeah.
I think, we always thought, I just want to make, so we always thought that the ethanol or the sugarcane surplus in India would have to at some point be seen as an energy surplus, which would meet the needs of the nation. And so, finally that has happened, and the government has now created a demand which, we could not even have anticipated. So they are, 1 or 2 steps ahead of us, and that's a wonderful place to be in. As a company, if I went back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we used to make something like 30 million liters a year in a distillery, making 200,000 liters per day. Very quickly, we changed that to 320,000 liters per day. And last year, we increased it to 400,000 liters per day. So we moved very quickly. And next year, we are expanding it to 600,000 liters per day. And so from 30 million liters, this year, we plan to make 80 million liters. And we also definitely think that the opportunity that grain provides is a wonderful opportunity to add to that. And so therefore, we are imagining whether the same facility can produce about 130, 140 million liters. And I think that's, so a combination of more than one feedstock, optionality in sugar cane to sugar and ethanol, and the market that has been created. And the bolt-on approach is what actually makes it much more viable. And I think going into the future, the bolt-on approach will also be something that will make 2G ethanol more viable. See, the sugar factories have an advantage that they have bagasse generated on site. Having bagasse generated on site takes away the problem of bagasse collection or collection of biomass. This doesn't mean that you don't do it elsewhere, you do it everywhere you can. But in bagasse collection, that comes on site, and you do a bolt-on approach. So you need both types of approaches. You need the standalone greenfield 2G facilities, the type that Praj is building or the type that Adnan is building. You need those as well. And you also need the facilities of bolt-on. And I completely agree that right now Praj is learning from its experiences in the 3 plants it's building, and Clariant is learning from the sites it's building. We are also doing a lot of research on trying to see how a bolt-on works. And we always cannot imagine today's CapEx or today's OpEx as something that will be the future. The future is always an evolution to evolve, learn, and improve upon. So I think as a company, we will also add bolt-on ethanol facilities to what we are doing. And I really think that the opportunity is also, as Shishir mentioned, about, you're talking about CNG, you can also do from biomass, bio-CNG. And so you have multiple energy possibilities. And as Godavari is concerned, we very much want to be doing that while we keep continuing to make sugar to make your lives sweeter. That's what I would like to say. So that's where we are going.
Sir, you are not only making life sweeter, I think you are also seeing that both Praj as well as Clariant succeed in a good way, so that prices come down, and so that India can benefit in the long run with the use of this low, what we can say, carbon fuel that we are talking about. Thank you, sir, for your very good, what we can say, trying to club both Sashi Joshipura's comment as well as Mr. Adnan Ahmed's comment on the same, on the issue as such. Milind, sir, if you can talk about, we are presently hovering at around 8% to 9% in terms of blending, but how do we move ahead in future from a mandate of 20% ethanol blending, which looks more likely that we will achieve by the designated time that the government has given? So your views, sir.
Yeah. 2 things. One thing very quickly, which I wanted to add to what Mr. Adnan and Mr. Shishir Joshipura were talking. In 2G ethanol, if I were to tell you that I have tied up my biomass for next 15 years at 2 rupees a kg, suddenly the proposition becomes very, very attractive, because I have tied up the entire biomass for next 15 years. And therefore, whatever capex may be, but at the same time, tying up a feedstock and removing the uncertainty around the biomass, I think is very important in the Indian context for 2G ethanol. This is one point I wanted to make out of my own experience. Coming to the 1G ethanol that you talked about, yes, as I said, this is a huge challenge, because today UP, Maharashtra, Karnataka mainly produce 1G ethanol, almost 80–90%. And of course, the rest flows from these states to the nearby states. Oil marketing companies have very categorically worked out what are the surplus states and what are the deficit states. And oil marketing companies themselves are putting up plants only in deficit states, number one. So I know that BPC, IOC, and HPC, at least 40–50 crore liters, each of them are putting up. So at least 150 crore liters of capacity is coming up mainly from the oil marketing companies alone in the deficit states. That's number one. Number 2, what is also happening, that under interest subvention scheme of Government of India, a lot of new capacities which have been approved, there are large number of capacities coming up in these deficit states. So that's also the second thing that is happening. Third, of course, as I said, maize farming. The Government of India is working around improving the maize farming and improving the maize yield. And if that happens simultaneously, and a lot of maize also starts getting cultivated in some of these areas, I think a lot of maize then would be available for the sugarcane. The last point that I want to mention is that even though we may say 1,000 crore liters, I think let's look at it practically. If a E20 compliant vehicle is introduced in 2023, there are going to be vehicles on road. Almost 90% of the population or 95% of the population will require only E10. They cannot take E20, okay, by design, which means even though we may say 1,000 crore liters is required for E20, it's a very mathematical calculation. It will not happen. What is going to actually happen is in 2025, you will have 95% of the vehicles requiring E10, 5% vehicles only requiring E20. And as the time goes by, more and more E20 vehicles come in the market, the percentage of E20 will go up, E10 will come down. So actual 1,000 crore liters may not be required. What you require is maybe 600, 700 crore liters. So you are at 320, 350 or 400 crore liters today capacity. You have to go to about 700 crore liters. Let's be realistic. And then by 2030, you will have a substantial population of E20 compliant vehicles, maybe 40, 50%. 50% would be the balance E10 population. So maybe 1,000 crore actually would be required in 2030, which will be a combination of E20 and E10. So that's a very realistic picture I thought I would like to put up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving that realistic picture. On the one hand, you talked about 1,000, and it's good that since we will not have those number of vehicles, so that's the reason you are reducing.
Because we need to create capacities, definitely. That's why we need to work on that number.
So now I come to Professor Goncalo Pereira, sir. You were talking about during the discussion that we had, you were talking about bioelectrification. And so how do you look at bioelectrification and the future of bioethanol considering the climate change? So over to Professor Goncalo Pereira.
First of all, I'd like very much to stress that ethanol is a wonderful molecule. It's an incredible molecule, both for combustion, because it's a clean combustion, and also because it has a lot of hydrogen inside the molecule, and it's a liquid molecule. Oil made such a success because it is liquid. And we have the opportunity to have a liquid molecule that can be used for combustion and also has a lot of hydrogen inside it. Only for you to remember, everything that you see here as white is hydrogen. Actually, this is liquid hydrogen. And this hydrogen, as everybody knows, has an electron. And this electron, through this new technology like fuel cell, can be utilized to make an electric currency. Then, instead to have a big battery putting electricity in the electric motors, we can have ethanol as the real battery, and this battery can provide the electrons to make electricity to this autos. In my opinion, in my view, electric autos is something that is the future because it become, let's say, sexy. Everybody wants to have an electric car. Everybody, this is done. I think that we must be very realistic, as my colleague here say, and go in the direction from a percentage of ethanol going in the future to, as we have here in Brazil, 27% of ethanol blending, and also hydrous ethanol to have to put directly in our autos, which are flex, most of them. I do think this is a very good way to go. However, we must immediately put a lot of effort in the bioelectrification in order to develop initially the hybrid cars, having ethanol motors to generate electricity to electric cars. This is a technology that is here. And at the same time, the big opportunity to develop the fuel cells in order to have an industry that in my dream would be led by Brazil and India in order to put a real electrification that is really carbon free in the world. Putting all this value chain together and second generation ethanol is absolutely essential in this strategy.
Thank you, Professor Goncalo Pereira. Now I come to Mr. Shishir Joshipuraji. Can Praz Industries ensure minimum 15% ROI under the existing price structure? Because you know the price that we will get, the manufacturer will get while supplying OMC. And how do you see the biofuel market from 2021 to 25 and after 2025? And I think the same question will also apply to Mr. Adnan Ahmed ji after CCG speaks.
All right. So since Samir is on the panel, I refuse to answer that.
I have just muted myself.
Sir, why we are asking this? Because nowadays it is mainly an outsourcing of technology, and here if the partnership works, I think you will, instead of getting 3, you will get 30.
No,
That's the reason I'm asking you these, sir.
No. I think the underlying question is, how do we make sure that the emerging biofuels become viable commercial propositions? Because unless that happens, we will not see capacity development, right? So the key challenge for all of us, me, Adnan's companies, for us, it is very clearly, even for that matter, Mr. Engineer's company, for us to ensure that we are able to provide a CAPEX, OPEX solution that is commercially viable. If that does not happen, the industry will not grow. That is very clear understanding. Now, there are different levers that one could use to actually achieve that position. One is, of course, reduce the overall process complexity. You re-engineer your processes. You define your hardwares differently. You look at your yields differently. You look at your maybe you have a different set of co-products that come out of your process. So there are a whole host of levers that one could use to arrive at what constitutes an optimum pricing model. The 1G technology today is a very, very mature and established technology. There is no problem. I can, eyes closed, I can say, yes, 15% is guaranteed irrespective of the feedstock. But having said that, I think what's more important is to see how do we, on 2 dimensions. One, as the feedstocks evolve to more difficult ones, as I call them, and difficult because there you have to process the feedstocks before you can go to the sugar of starch separation from the basic feedstock. To going to different iterations of the ethanol molecule that the professor was mentioning, that it's a beautiful molecule, but I have to then iterate it to different product lines. So those 2, we have to make sure that the value addition that happens on either side is actually much more than the money that you spend in helping in making that value realization happen. So I think the technology challenge is very clear. We need to look at whole host of levers to reduce the cost, both for CAPEX and OPEX. Continuously focused to make it more and more commercially viable. But as things stand, and I again reiterate, today we are living in a world, and especially in India, and for that matter, for most part of the world, there is no carbon tax for us. Yeah, and we are actually stealing the future away from our children. If we have to pay a carbon tax, we'll very quickly realize the value of what is it that it actually costs us to use the current fuel mix that we have got, and therefore it will shift. World over, there are different mechanisms that have proven over a period of time in history that how we can use different levers to change the behavior of the society. Biofuels' biggest advantage, in my opinion, it does not ask for a change in lifestyle. The lifestyle of the people remaining same, we can still meet the goal of sustainability. And from that perspective, biofuels hold a very, very large existing fleet, the existing infrastructure. It doesn't matter to you. Today, when I and you go to petrol pump, do we even know in Maharashtra, for example, we are even already at 13-14% of blending. We don't even know that, right? We just go and we think it's petrol. It's 14% blended ethanol that you're using in your car every day. No problem. Right. So I think from that perspective, it is very important that we create A, awareness, but B, also all the discussions that we had today about creating better facilities, more competitive product lines and technology, putting up better capacities, policy environments. I think everything will have to actually align to take it forward. If somebody would have told us 3 years ago that we were talking of 1,000 crore liters in this country, we would have laughed. But today it is not the case, right? So very clearly things have moved very positively in the direction. Samirji himself said how he has from 30 to 80. That's a big journey for any production facility, and I think he has done it in such a short time. And we are very happy that we are partnering them for that. So what's important is that we take it's a journey. It's not a destination by itself. It's a journey that we've undertaken, and I think we will see it unfold in its different dimensions as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. Adnan, sir, if you can talk about the same question that I'm putting you, what would be the right capabilities so that ethanol manufacturers can get 15 to 20% return on investment?
So I think the first half of your question is easier to answer than the second half. But Mr. Joshipura explained it very nicely, and I would just add to that and say that you've got capex in one place and you've got your opex in the other. And again, if I look at Clariant's 2G technology on the opex front, we've made a lot of progress to make sure that the opex front ensures that we can stay competitive. So the enzyme that is used, which is like a catalyst, is produced in situ. You don't need to bring it from outside and keep on adding it. So rather than bringing tons and tons of enzyme, you don't need that. You just start with something small and then it produces in situ. Also, we just heard mentioning about the pre-treatment. The pre-treatment is chemical free. It's more thermal pre-treatment. So because it's chemical free, you need less washing and you don't need that much water and so on. So again, that reduces your cost. It reduces your burden on energy and resources and so on. So these are the kind of things you have to keep chipping away at your process to make sure that you turn competitive. The big challenge is right now, as I see it, on the capex side, and that is where we need support from governments to just give you a head start, because there is no question over a period of time, as more and more plants come up, this issue will get resolved. And again, Shishir is talking about the fact that you're stealing future from your children and your grandchildren. You're stealing their future, and there's about time that there'll be a demand for you to put that back. And at that time, the capex is going to be a very small cost to do that. So right now we have to focus on whatever you can do, chip away at the opex. I think that from an opex perspective, we are competitive. The issue is really on the capex, and we have to keep on innovating. And I've seen some of the excellent work that Samir has done in his plant, so to make sure that you do some bolt-on and something, and I'm sure something will come up. And this lower cost option, my prediction is it will come in India. It will come in India because of this whole mindset of finding good ways to make things work. I do believe it will come in.
Thank you, Adnanji. Let me now come to Samir to give his last remarks. Sir, what we are looking at is we are now looking at sugarcane industries to be energy hub. We thought power industries are the energy hub, but now we are looking at sugarcane industry, which used to provide sugarcane juice as energy hub. So this is a new terminology which is coming up. And so what would be the holistic approach that sugarcane industries should follow in order to see that they become the energy hub? So over to Mr. Samir Sumayati.
So, the first thing is, I think we cannot forget that these fuels are grown in the farm in cooperation with the farmer. So I think we have to first recognize that we have a partnership with our many farmers. Innovations have to also come in the way Gonzalo said, in the way we farm, in terms of water use as well as resource use. If you do it well, the soil health has to be good so that the soil is ready to produce more or equal to this year and next year. And that has to be the first thing. The second also has to be, without forgetting, crop geometry. We've done 5 years of research on intercropping sugarcane beet with sugarcane. And so if you do it smartly, you have another bolt-on opportunity of sugar beet with sugarcane. So you plant the beet before the cane grows too tall, you harvested it already. And so I think these are opportunities which, we think that, all innovation happens inside a factory with all the engineers like myself. But, we have to recognize that a lot of innovation happens with the farmer, with the agriculturist, traditional, modern, and often at the interface of what is traditional and what is modern. So I think that is one area that sugarcane, so whether it is, we have such extension services unlike most other industries, sugarcane has tremendous extension services with its farmers. So whether it's also helping them with maize, whether it's helping them with these other crops, soya intercropping also to reduce the nitrogen footprint, I think these are ways that we have to work on. That's one. The second, is already mentioned, the ethanol we produce or the biogas we produce can be used for the energy hub in the future. The third is also sugarcane factories are surplus in bagasse and they produce bioelectricity as a natural part of the cogeneration we do, of, as Cyrus engineer also put it. So when we do that, you know, we automatically are electricity producers and create a network for fueling the EVs which are in our area. I think the EVs are here, they are here to come. So we have to participate in making sure that the cars we have are hybrid, such that they can use ethanol and electricity, both of which what we produce. In the longer term, we will have 2G, longer term, we have fuel cells. But this is what we can do and participate in this. On the EV thing, again, I will repeat that ethanol is a wonderful solar energy and disposal of this is not an issue, because the disposal of that is again carbon dioxide, which goes back into the cane. So this is the second portion that I see. So it's an energy hub coming from ethanol, electricity and biogas. All sustainable, all renewable. You farm well, you can keep it going, and you cannot, you know, it keeps growing well. The last thing I think is that these are also platform chemistries for the future. You can do a lot of biochemicals and biomaterials. Our company Godavari has been doing a lot of biochemicals there as well. We've, of course, working also with Praj, and we've also explored possibilities of 2G and had discussions with Clariant also, and, you know, going in the future. And with Praj, we're also doing our current expansion. So I think, but biomaterials and is also a future, and biochemicals is also a future. So it's not only energy. The world is looking at low carbon footprint for all the resources it consumes. And if we have to be sustainable, we have to look at all the products we consume and the carbon footprint of everything we do. So I think it's a very happening time to be in. The world is recognizing that it needs to be done, and there is no choice but to do it. We happen to be in that place, and all of us here sitting on this are doing our best to, and we are only representing the larger group that is making it happen.
Wonderfully put it, and I just want to add one liner to it. When you said that sugarcane industries will become energy hub, it would be a hub and spoke arrangement. Hub being the, what we can say, the ethanol manufacturer, the sugarcane manufacturer, and the spoke would be the technology provider, the government, the farmers, and the oil marketing companies.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, that, you know, we have to give credit to the government for making this happen. I think somebody said it that 3 years ago, if somebody would have said that we would be having 10 billion liters, and nobody would have believed it. And you have to here give the imagination credit to the government. And now that they're piloting E100 as well, I think, you know, this is only the beginning. And the industry has to rise to the challenge of, you know, yields of crops and sustainable farming to show that this is just the beginning. So I just want to give credit to the government.
And credit to also Mr. Milind Patke, who was part of the government earlier.
Thank you.
Because of the oil marketing companies, and who have tried to convince the government, the secretary and the minister and the prime minister, to see that these things happen so that India can move forward and the farmers can double the economy. We have around 23 questions. I will take some of them. We will not be able to take all of them, but there are some interesting questions. So I'm just taking few of them. Ravi Ramanathan talks about, what about crops other than maize, such as cassava? So Sisirji, if can we use cassava?
Yeah, we can use. We already have several plants working. Cassava is a very popular feedstock in Africa, especially Thailand, Africa, and we have built plants that produce ethanol out of cassava. So it's a very done thing by us. And our plants have been operating for over a decade.
So thank you, sir. Then there is an anonymous attendee who is asking from Mr. Cyrus Engineer, Industrial Boilers Limited, how are you gearing up for green hydrogen as a hybrid fuel for your boilers? So he's giving a task to you, sir, so that you start making boilers also for green hydrogen, using green hydrogen as a fuel.
Well, I assume he's talking about ethanol. And if ethanol is the fuel for the boiler, we are talking of at least 55 to 60 rupees a liter, which is what the government is offering us. So compared to something which is 3 rupees or 4 rupees a kilogram, surely it is not going to be viable to burn ethanol in its form, or green, whatever name you would like to call it.
Thank you, Cyrus ji. Nischint Kanodia is talking to, the question is to Mr. Milind Patke. What is the current status of TPA, which are supposed to be signed with OMCs? What happens in a situation where industry has taken EC for only ethanol manufacturing, the same is unable to be off-taken by the OMC in a situation of surplus supply expected by 2025? He's from MASH Biofuels Private Limited. And I'm adding the Amit Bansal question also, sir. Are there any process challenges for which catalysts or absorbents are required or being explored? So over to Mr. Milind Patke.
Okay. As far as the first question is concerned, let me tell you that the oil marketing companies are ready to sign the tripartite agreements for the deficit states only. And if I understand correctly, he's putting up his plant in Orissa. So it's a deficit state, and therefore oil marketing companies will go ahead and sign a sales purchase agreement with, and he let him approach the oil marketing companies right now itself, because I believe his production is going to start in February 22, which is not very far away. And Orissa being a deficit state definitely requires ethanol. Right now we are moving from outside the state, so nothing stops him from going and approaching the oil marketing companies for tying up his 100% capacity. Yeah, as far as second question is concerned, I leave it to the technology providers. I think they would be able to answer it better. Yeah.
So if we use ethanol as a building block, then and then we need to iterate it to other products. There are product lines which will need catalysts in the whole process. So yes, they are required, and that's all I can say right now. I mean, I don't go to specific what the catalyst for which process, but if you take ethanol as a building block and then you want to iterate it to further stuff, yes, you can. There's no question.
Praveen Chandra Seth talks about what can be the best percent combo composition of petrol and ethanol for an effective output for effective cost per unit kilometer. Shishirji?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? There's a bit.
What can be the best percent composition of petrol and ethanol for an effective output for effective cost per unit? He's talking about mileage. What would be the ideal percentage for getting the mileage?
Well, I think it's not about the ideal percentage. It's about, do you have an engine that can take, so we are talking about flex fuel vehicles, right? We have heard the minister talk about it. Brazil is already having flex fuel. I think it's an experience to go to Brazil and look at just the petrol pump, if you don't look at anything else, the different dispensation points. So a flex fuel vehicles will permit you to switch from 0 to 100. So I think that, and then each of the fuel mix will have a different purpose. Now, the vehicle itself may have a different purpose. If you're in-city driving, intra-city driving, you want to go to rough terrain, there are different dimensions which can come to play to determine the economics of a percentage point. But I think these are too early days. We should worry about these right now, where our country is 7 to 8% of blending that we're talking about. And I think that when we go to E10 as base fuel across the country, that itself is a big change. We are still quite away from deciding whether I should choose between E20 to E40. We are still away. Till we get the flex fuel vehicles, that's a moot question.
The question from Binay Amte is, how about methanol fuel economy as suggested by Niti Aayog? This is also being pursued rigorously by China.
Methanol.
So he's talking about how about methanol fuel economy as suggested by Niti Aayog.
Methanol was discussed, but I think since there is a health hazard handling methanol, so methanol is not being actively pursued. And availability of methanol also remains a big question mark in India. So because of these two reasons, methanol is not really being pursued, though the auto companies as well as even IOC R&D have tested some mixtures of methanol and ethanol, and which are, I wouldn't say encouraging very much, but then the entire proposition has not taken off only because of the health hazard issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Milinji. Vinay Amte, he's talking about, is there any progress in dual fuel engine instead of blended fuel in automobile sector, wherein disadvantages of ethanol in gasoline can be tackled effectively? And I am putting this question to Professor Goncalo Pereira. So if you can unmute yourself and answer, sir.
I don't know if I understood exactly
He's talking about dual fuel, sir, ethanol plus gasoline engine instead of blended fuel. So instead of blending, he's saying you have an engine where it has both, depending upon what readily it is available, you use ethanol, and if you can change to gasoline whenever it is required.
Yeah, in Brazil, we have the experience till 27% of ethanol, can be more in the blend of the gasoline without any problem in the normal motors that we have now, but it was a development. I'm not saying put immediately in your autos this amount, but it must be tested. But in Brazil, I would say that the utilization of flex fuel autos was the real revolution. In this case, you can use ethanol or gasoline in any concentration you want with very high efficiency in the new motors. In my opinion, is the very close future.
Thank you, sir. The question is to Mr. Milind, sir. As mentioned in his presentation, that water consumption will be a major worry factor. So how do we take care of this, sir?
No, so as I said, if you're putting up a 2G ethanol plant for a 100 KLPD plant, you require almost 3000 KL makeup water per day. As the time goes by, obviously there are chances that it will be optimized, but as of now, at least it's 3000 KL. For a 1G ethanol plant of almost 500 KL per day, it also requires almost 3000 KL or near about that. Now, the thing is that to start with, the project proponent will have to look for a land which is quite adjacent to river, from where the pipeline can be put up and, water can be taken up. So therefore, that limits somewhere the location of the plant. It's only from that context I mentioned this, because if the water is not readily available and if you have to put up a pipeline of 30-40 kilometers away, then obviously then your capex goes up. That's the thing. So definitely, as the time goes by, I'm sure the technology providers would try and optimize the water requirement over a period of time. But that does remain a challenge as of now. That's my opinion.
And one more question, sir. What is the effect on biofuel usage for automobile functioning? Is there any change in automobile functioning with the usage of biofuel or the blended fuel?
See, it's like this. Ethanol has a lower calorific value compared to petrol. Therefore, when you blend ethanol with petrol, definitely, if the engine is not modified, you are getting a less mileage. Let's face it. But automakers are planning to redesign their engine to take advantage of a higher octane of ethanol and therefore go for a higher compression ratio and thereby improve the thermal efficiency of the engine. When that happens, to a very large extent, the lower calorific value negative point of ethanol gets nullified. So therefore, there would be only 1 or 2% drop, but then there would be a simultaneous increase in the torque, because some of the tests have shown that with E10 and E20, for the same engine RPM, you are getting a much better torque. So ultimately, it's the kind of value proposition that each automaker would bring to the table. It would be required. It would depend on that. So I don't think, as many other speakers in the panel have mentioned, I think is the larger question of the environment, which is far more important, and therefore 1 or 2% efficiency loss here and there, I don't think should matter much, because ultimately we have to reduce the carbon footprint, and that is where we have to go.
Professor Goncalo Pereira, if you would like to add to whatever Milind sir said.
A comment about the 2G. As the colleague Ahmad spoke, the problem now is CAPEX. But in my opinion, the problem in CAPEX is because the industry began in the wrong way. People believed that the problem was with biotechnology, enzymes and yeasts, and that the CAPEX was dominated because the people of the pulp and paper industry was over 100 years utilizing machinery for the movement and processing of cellulose. But this was completely wrong, because the machinery utilized by wood was not the same that would be necessary for straw. And Clariant did a very nice job, because it was the first one that considered this appropriately. However, in Brazil, and not only Brazil, if you look, the number of initiatives around 2010 that began and stopped because of this very problem was enormous. However, we see that in Brazil, Ryzen, the company Ryzen, announced the second generation mill. And this was the most expected announcement for the sector. And after this announcement that has been done, because they have dominated the process and are making money with this, they made an APO which raised $1.2 billion for the company. That means, my opinion, ethanol is the new crude. This is the new crude. If people were able to produce ethanol in Europe, in the US, in a high amount and in a sustainable way, I have no doubt that this comment that we have here would be so obvious, because ethanol is the true molecule. You can do everything with this. You can do jet fuel, you can do molecules for chemicals. We can do everything utilizing ethanol. We need, in my opinion, India and Brazil, more specifically, the capacity, the leadership to show to the world that we have technology, this is economical feasible, this is a lot of opportunity. Only to finish, we are speaking here about the ethanol in motors. If you put ethanol in fuel cells, instead of 10 kilometers per liter, you are going to 25 kilometers per liter. It's much more efficient than oil because of the configuration of the molecule. This is, in my opinion, the future. I would say that India and Brazil has a huge responsibility with humanity in order to show this is economically feasible, good business, and essential for the planet.
Thank you. One last 30 seconds from everybody. There is a lot of question with respect to hydrogen and ethanol. So who will win the race, or will it be both will coexist? So we start from Milind, sir.
Sorry, your question?
Hydrogen versus ethanol. So
I think,
what will coexist, sir?
no, ethanol is something which is immediate. Hydrogen, my opinion, will take some more time. So I think to start with, yes, ethanol.
Shishir?
I think right now, obviously, it is ethanol, but as we move forward and the whole ecosystem starts to transit to hydrogen, ethanol will have a very important role to play in generation of hydrogen. So both will coexist. Maybe ethanol's role will change. As I said, it will move from being the building itself to being the basic building block. As we move forward, it will, especially for onboard production of hydrogen, which is most likely scenario as of now for all four-wheelers, personal vehicles, where you cannot have large tanks or heavy tanks or heavy weights carried on board. It will be an onboard hydrogen solution generation, and ethanol will have a very, very important role to play in that. So as we move forward, I think whether it's electric vehicles, biofuel-driven vehicles, hydrogen-driven vehicles, we'll move into an ecosystem which will coexist over a period of time, and finally, over a much longer period of time, the best technology will win. There is no question. But where will you get the hydrogen from? We'll get hydrogen from ethanol. I think it is a solar form that is getting converted. We will have to convert it differently. Some other economies in Middle East may be converting to hydrogen from a different source. So hydrogen sources may be different. Ethanol, especially for agrarian economies, ethanol will be a big source.
Professor Goncalo Pereira, your 30 seconds.
Well, I would say that everything that we speak is always about hydrogen. Again, the molecule, it's full of hydrogen. However, instead of having this as a gas, very dangerous, very difficult to compress, we have a liquid molecule full of hydrogen. What is fuel cell technology? What does this technology does? Exactly. It takes this hydrogen, put this in line, and convert this in electricity. Instead of being a problem, this is the future of electricity, because it has always been about hydrogen. Ethanol is a kind of hydrogen bunch. This is how I see ethanol.
Samir ji, your 30 seconds, sir.
I'll just take 3 seconds. I said any which way you look at it, the planet and the people will win.
Mr. Cyrus Engineer ji.
Well, I'm a big fan of hydrogen. And I'm very sure that hydrogen will finally win this race. Whether we take it through the ethanol route or through the solar route, but hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and oxygen and hydrogen are going to be the winners in the game.
So let me thank all my speakers. They were very eloquent. Plus, they have added a lot to our knowledge that we had before this event. So I'm really thankful to all the speakers. Mr. Adnan Ahmed, VC and MD, Clariant India. Mr. Sameer Somaya, CMD, Godavari Biorefineries Limited. Mr. Milind S. Patke, former Executive Director, Biofuels, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. Mr. Shishir Joshipura, CEO and MD, Praj Industries Limited. Professor Goncalo Pereira, full professor and coordinator, Genomics and Bioenergy Laboratory, Unicam. So once again, I would thank from all the delegates who have participated for coming to this morning call at 6 o'clock. I'm really thankful to him for getting up early for this e-conference. Mr. Cyrus Engineer, Director, Industry and Boilers Limited and IP Turbo Private Limited. Let me also thank my supporting partner, Industrial Boilers Limited, for making this event a grand success. I would request all delegates to give their feedback in the chat window, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. I think our delegates will rank us on the highest side. I believe so. So please give your feedback. I see 137 participants. Please give your feedback or comment so that we can send these to our speakers. So wonderful comment from everybody. This shows that the World Biofuel Day that we are celebrating with this illustrious gathering of industry has been a grand success. I would request all delegates to register for the next set of events, which we have already announced. Let me thank all delegates who participated in this event. Those who register and could not participate can watch the recorded version on Indian Chemical News website later. Let me thank once again all speakers, delegates, and ICN team members for making this e-conference a grand success. And let me personally also thank Praj Industries, who gave us the feedback to make this World Biofuel Day event. Also to Mr. Sameer Somaya ji, who helped us in getting the right speakers for the conference, and Mr. Milind S. Patke to provide the complete info and did a very wonderful job of preparing that PPT, which made my life easier, sir. and I think a lot of people who do not understand in detail were able to understand in in-depth perspective. So once again, sir, thanks to all my speakers, all delegates, and all the key people from ICN team members who are always at the back end. And I am the only one who come at the front end to tell you what's that has happened in the back end. And let me thank once again everybody. And this is Praveen Prashant signing off to meet again on August 27, where we are doing an event on agrochemical at 2:55 p.m. Till then, take care, stay safe, goodbye, and namaste from India.